your Classic Metal Show right here on the ClassicMetalShow.com. That is music from the 2019 release of The Dark Element. That song was called Not Your Monster. That was from Songs the Night Sings. And on the line right now, we have the vocalist of that song here to sing us about a new project that she's in, as well as maybe talking a little Dark Element. It is Anette Olzen. Annette, how are you?
Hi, I'm really good. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Well, Annette, it seems like you just stay busy. It's one of those things where, unlike a lot of bands, a lot of band people, your name never seems to go away. It's like you were doing Nightwish, then as soon as you were out of Nightwish, you were doing, Dark Element. You've appeared with a lot of people. Seems like you stay very busy.
Well, yeah, there were some years after Nightwish that I was a bit calm. I did my solo album, but otherwise there was a bit of a silence. I did some, duets and smaller things. And then the Dark Element, of course, has taken off with 2 albums, and then this Anette Olzen stuff, and there will be some more, of course. So yeah, I try to stay busy at the moment. It's fun.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk just briefly about the Dark Element for people that haven't discovered it. The Dark Element is one of those projects. I think it's like almost like the start of you just getting heavier musically. Not that Nightwish ever wasn't a heavy band, but it really seems like that project, and especially the 2 records have both gotten heavier as you've gone along. Is that kind of how you're progressing as an artist?
Actually, yeah. I mean, I don't come from the metal scene from the beginning.
Right.
When I started in Nightwish, I was like not at all in the metal scene. I came from more rocky, poppy stuff, from my background. And then it's been evolving, and I guess I've been just feeling that I love the metal scene in many ways, and I like the music, and I actually like a lot of heavy guitar. So I asked Yanni for the first album, it was a little bit softer, and then we decided in the second, I said, I want to go even heavier. Let's do it bigger and heavier. And he was like, yeah, for sure. So maybe the third album will be even more heavy.
Right.
We don't know.
No doubt. Is a part of the reason that you've gotten heavier musically because you've done so many tours and so much touring with metal musicians, whether it's individual touring or even playing on the big stages like at Wacken and stuff like that. You're around metal more. Does that kind of rub off on you to where you want to make heavier music?
Yeah, I mean, it's many things. Of course, I also have a fan base within the metal sector in a way. So of course, I believe they want to hear more from me in the metal scene and the rock scene. They like that kind of music. So it's also the requests I get when it comes to these project albums, and the songs are mainly from rock metal scene. And of course, I've been influenced by all the music I've heard in, as you say, Wacken and Rock am Ring, and with all the bands and I do like metal musicians. They are really talented, all of them. It's good musicians. So, and the music is cool, and it's fun to be on stage in that kind of music. So yeah, I think it's influenced me a lot.
Sure. Now, Annette, moving to where we are today, 2020 has a new project for you. You step into what has already been a very successful collaboration between Russell Allen, obviously known for Symphony X, and Magnus Carlsen. They had quite a good working relationship on the Allen Land releases, and then now you're stepping in kind of in the Yorn position, sort of, but it doesn't feel the same. I was a big fan of those records, and you've added like a different energy to it. So talk a little bit about how this came about, and did you know Russell ahead of time? Had you ever talked about working together, or is this a put together thing by the label, or what?
Yeah, this is also a put together thing from Frontiers, again, like with the Dark Element, where we didn't know each other. I didn't know Magnus, I didn't know Russell, actually. Of course, I've heard both Allen Land and some of their stuff, and I also have been singing with Jorn in the same stage in Israel, so I know him a bit.
Okay.
I haven't met Russell personally, but of course I knew his name and that he had a great voice.
Sure.
And Magnus, I knew when they said his name, of course, that it was Alan Lande, but I had to listen a little bit, from the background of him also. So it was like a thing Frontiers asked me, and I knew that Alan Lande has been a very popular project, and they are two great singers. So I was a bit nervous, of course, how those from the fan base of those albums would react to a female coming in, taking his place, since he's a really popular singer. But I believe, as you say, there's a different kind of vibe and feeling when there's a female coming into these songs. It's a good contrast to Russell's massive voice,
Sure.
So I think I hope the fans will like it and feel that it's a cool collaboration.
Sure. Now, being that you haven't met Russell before, how do you create music, that works well with the other person? Is it already written, or do you have to kind of listen to it like trading MP3s back and forth, or how exactly do you put together a project with somebody you've never met?
But that's the thing with us, like, a bit professional musicians in today's world, that I guess if you have done a lot of singing like Russell and me both and been singing with others, it's not that difficult. It's always, of course, when you I get the songs kind of in a demo state.
Right.
And this time around, they had started recording with Russell some songs before before Magnus knew that I was going to be the singer. So the songs were kind of written for, I guess, maybe for Jorn also in the beginning. I don't know, but so the problem was for me when I got them that I'm a female and he's a male, and we have different keys that we want to sing in. So I had to adjust some of the melody lines and how that I put the harmony that I'm singing higher, taking a higher harmony, since it's quite low for me if I would go in Russell's melody.
Right.
But otherwise, just go to the studio and you try to follow him, and you have your melody, and then I do the harmonies, follow him, and then he got some songs where I sang first, and he had to follow me. Right. So, but it worked. So you can do it that way if you're, if you have been doing music before.
Sure.
It's not that hard.
Are you comfortable being in a project that is a true shared vocal project? Because obviously your past, your hard rock heavy metal past has been primarily with you as the featured singer.
I don't have any problem. Actually, my first band ever, when I was like 16, I was in this cover band, and there was me and a guy sharing the stage.
Okay.
And I've also had in Allison Avenue, we were two, like one male and female. So I don't have any problem with that. I am not that part that needs to, compete with the other singer. So I think it's no problem at all. And I think it's fun for the listener to hear two different voices. There are some songs with only Russell, there are some with me, and there are some together. So it will not be like this boring kind of album where they only hear one voice, if you think that kind of way. So no, I think it's fun, different, and I haven't done it, as you say, in an album, but I enjoyed it a lot.
Sure. Now, when you were, I'm assuming you go to a studio somewhere there near home, and you do your parts and you send it off, and it gets mixed and it gets mastered, and all the knob turning happens, and then it gets sent back to you. Does it sound, when you first heard Worlds Apart, did it sound like what you envisioned in your mind, or was it greatly different or a little different, or how does it come back versus what you thought you submitted?
I always ask, like with Magnus, I said that I wanted to be quite involved in the mixing process and also in the Dark Element. And that is a way for me to be able to tell if I don't feel happy about my voice or my sound, or if it's, if there's something so you always, when I send the files, I first send them to Magnus, and he makes like a raw mix, very raw mix,
Okay.
like just put it together for the record label and us. And sometimes there I can be like, yeah, I don't know. Well, and then I tell him something, maybe you should put the harmonies up or something. So already there I start to be involved in that process. And then he sends it off to our mixing guy, Jacob. And Jacob is a great guy because he always sends me like a first version. And then me and Magnus and Russell, of course, say, change this, fix that. And then that happens a couple of times, maybe 2 or 3 times before we're all very happy about it. But I think actually Jacob, who has mixed both this and the Dark Element, I know he always make me sound perfect and a big sound. And, he knows how I want to be heard.
Sure.
So no, I feel that I'm actually more happy when I've heard the final mix always than the first mix and the first demo, of course.
Right, definitely. Now for you, which song or songs came out best on Worlds Apart, and why do you think that?
Well, I had my favorites that I wanted to have as singles, of course, and I really like Worlds Apart. It was actually the song that I had to go 2 times to the studio to record, just because the first time, it was the first song I did record. And at that time, I just sang it like the melody was before I changed it to a higher one. And I wasn't happy about it. So I had to go back, and then I changed the melody line. So I'm singing a bit higher and a different melody. And then it felt good. But actually, I think No Sign of Life is my absolute favorite on the album. And I think it's such a powerful chorus, and, we just scream our lungs out, and, it's heavy and cool. And then for my solo songs, I think I'll Never Leave You is kind of different from what I've done in some aspects. So, yeah, I like those 2.
But you like them all, right? They're all your children.
I like them all, of course. They're all my babies, You just want everyone to hear them now and just get it out, that album.
Yeah. At this point in the process where you're doing kind of, the press and the workup for it, is this the most frustrating time? Because you've had these songs for however long you've had them, but it's that time where you're starting to talk about it, but yet you can't direct anybody anywhere to go listen to anything but like one song at this point.
Yeah, and it's always that thing when you release the first song, which is very often, like in our case, it's the label who decides in the end which song it will be. And especially if you're like, yeah, but that song is maybe not like, it doesn't showcase the whole album, because it doesn't. Worlds Apart is not showing the whole album. There are so many songs that are heavier and different. So you're a bit like, I hope they don't, judge the album from the single. So you want to get the album out so everyone can hear the whole album and then decide if they like it or not. So, and I started recording this album last year in March or February.
Right.
So it's been like a year for me. So it's always that long waiting to get the baby out. Yeah.
At this point with the business the way it is, and you've obviously been in the business long enough to have seen, basically the complete change in the industry. Do you think that there is the same kind of like interest in a release? Because I'm sure you remember back in the day, as we say, when you would be completely excited about a release coming out, and you'd camp out at a record store or whatever to get it at midnight, and that's gone these days. And I know for me personally, I'm old. I'm 51, so I definitely lived through that era, and I find myself a lot of times discovering records or releases that are out that I just didn't even know were out anymore, because it doesn't seem like there's that build to a release anymore. Do you see that? And what do you think of that?
Yeah, I think there's so much music going on in Spotify and Amazon and iTunes and in the internet, that the physical release thing that we had like earlier, where you went to the store and bought like a cassette or a vinyl, and it was like you said, you were like waiting and waiting. That thing is kind of gone. I don't think the youth of today, they watch YouTube.
Yeah.
So today, in many ways, we don't put so much money in the videos as we did, or people did, when MTV was the biggest video showcase. But I can see my kids, they watch YouTube. That's where they get their music. YouTube. Yep. Maybe Spotify, but I mean, my kids don't own any CD records. You don't have them in your shelf as we had. We had vinyls and everything, like a showcase when people came. Oh, should we listen to this one? And you put it out on your party. So no, I think sadly it's not as it was. But of course, those that are fans, that are your fans, if you're a band, they will always be waiting and really appreciative of the release. But to the other people that don't know your band, you have to do a lot of promo, I guess.
Sure.
A lot of promotion, and you have to be in Instagram and Facebook and everywhere.
No, and the sad part is I'll call it the obsession that we had back then. But when we were kids, if I don't know, a new Motley Crue record or Metallica or whatever it was came out, you looked at the physical product and you read who was on the record and who mixed it and who mastered it and who guest vocaled. You knew all that stuff, and it made, I honestly think it's why we don't have as big of bands as we did back then, because you've taken a lot of that away. I mean, other than the promotional, type of interviews, you don't find that out anymore. Most kids today, I don't even want to say kids, most people today have no idea, other than the names that they know are on the record, who actually did any of the work on it. Exactly.
And I mean, I guess people like us that are a bit older, we may know what the bass player in a band was called, and the drummer, and there are like these big legends that we still know the names of. And we could like say all of those names. Yeah, that guitar player there, and you don't hear the kids, I guess, talk like we did and go so deep into it. And like you said, you have to have the physical release actually to see all those names. Otherwise it's just like in Spotify, you don't see who the bass player is, you don't see who the drummer is.
Sure.
So yeah, it is very different.
It definitely has it's almost made music disposable to the new generation. I honestly think that's why vinyl is making a comeback, because those of us that are a little bit older, we miss that day, so we're happy to spend, $25 or $30 for an album, because we can still get that piece of the music as part of it, Yeah,
and the vinyl is coming back. I mean, most releases today have a vinyl, and I hope also younger kids will appreciate the vinyl, but I mean, they don't know what a vinyl is. Right. If you tell your kids about it, they're like, what? When I show them the Dark Element vinyl, they're like, what? What's that? And I have to tell them, well, we did like this, we put this to do. And they're like, they don't understand anything. So I mean, we're too old, I guess. But I mean, I hope they will. I mean, one thing that I do recognize is actually that my 19-year-old kid, he is listening to a lot of songs that we listened to when I was 20. Sure. So it's coming back, because they have it in Spotify and everywhere. And that's kind of fun. But still, they don't have the physical release.
Sure.
No CDs or anything.
Yeah.
They wouldn't put money on it. I can tell my son would never go buy a CD.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy how it has changed where in the old days when in the old days when we were kids, you couldn't, you'd go out and cut your neighbor's grass to make the $8 to go buy the CD or the cassette that was coming out at the time,
Yeah, but you did. It was so important. And I remember I had these mixtapes called Mr. Music here in Sweden, where you got once a month or something, a mixed cassette tape with all the new songs. It's like a Spotify list, but in a cassette tape.
Sure.
And I was like waiting every month for that cassette to arrive to my mailbox, and it was such a nice thing, but now they have like a Spotify list.
Sure. Yeah, no.
And I mean, I don't buy albums, so I shouldn't say anything. I don't buy any albums anymore. I quit for many years ago. I use Spotify. So I shouldn't sit here and say like I'm better than no one, because I'm also a person in the modern sphere today.
Yeah.
But Spotify is a good thing, of course. It's good for everyone can listen. But still, of course, those days were it was better for the musicians, so to say.
Right. Yeah. You know, the interesting thing in that is that while it's easier to get music, it's harder to find new music. And, you know, like you just said, you would get a cassette. We had a similar thing here in the States. It was called the Concrete Corner, and the record stores all had this little table in the corner, and there was a company called Concrete Marketing, and they would just release a cassette once a month, would have, I don't know, 6 or 7 songs on it. And it was always bands that, you know, were not popular at the time. It was never, you know, Megadeth or whatever. It was always bands like Last Crack, or, you know, bands that nobody had heard of at the time. And I can tell you for a fact that I have probably 100 CDs in my collection that I found from these cassettes, the same way, where it was, I would have never heard them otherwise. I would never, if it was in today's market, I would have almost never heard of them, because while they'd all be on Spotify, there was nobody directing me to find it. You know, it's just different.
Yeah, and that's also a thing, because if you have a record label that are a bit bigger and that has a good connection with Spotify, and it's that Spotify that they add your song to a playlist,
right?
Like Kick-Ass Metal or something. That's really important also, because that's where people can find a new band. But if you don't have a record label, if you release your own music, then it's quite hard to get into those lists. And that's where you don't get to be heard from fans that haven't heard you before. So you have to have kind of that backup from a record label who can help you to put your songs in Spotify.
No question. Well, Anette, here's a song that's hitting a lot of Spotify playlists right now. I figured we would end with the single from Alan Olzen. The song is Worlds Apart. So why don't you tell us a little bit of a little bit about this song to wrap the interview up?
Well, this is a very energetic song in a way. It's like the song is how I interpret it. It's Magnus' song, of course, but I see it as it's a female and a male. I say that who are so far apart and they cannot like meet. It can be distance. I symbolize it with that Russell lives in America and I live in Sweden.
Sure.
But you know, we're so far away, and it can be a relationship where we can't meet because we don't talk the same language. We're like not on the same planet.
Right.
It's a melodic, up-tempo song that are really catchy in the chorus.
All right. Well, let's check it out right now. It is Alan Olzen. It is Worlds Apart right here on your Classic Metal Show.